I transmigrated as a male wife of a mafia boss before the boss died. Before the boss died, he grabbed my hand with the last of his strength and said, "Take care of the child I adopted with my white moonlight." So I did. I disbanded the gang, buried the blood-stained empire he built, and raised that gloomy, silent boy into a respectable business elite. 12 years passed in the blink of an eye. I had saved enough, planned my escape, and even prepared a convenient excuse, a marriage abroad. But before I could vanish, my foster son cornered me on my own bed. "Father," he murmured, breath ghosting against my skin, his smile both innocent and dangerous. "Why'd choose someone else?" He bit my earlobe lightly, whispering, "I look more like the person you loved than any of them, don't I?" When I first became Markashar's male wife, I thought it was a sweet deal. Plenty of money, very little work. The title came with luxury, respect, and the kind of fear that kept people from asking too many questions. At his funeral, I stood at the front, playing the part of the grieving widower with practiced grace. In reality, my mind was busy calculating the cost of the ceremony and the inheritance tax. Beside me stood a 10-year-old boy in an oversized black suit, Ethan. He looked like a puppet forced into adult clothes, his expression empty, eyes dark and bottomless. He didn't cry, not once. He just stared at Marcus's portrait until the crowd dispersed, leaving us alone in that vast, echoing estate. The remaining men, Mark's old subordinates, waited for my orders. I cleared my throat and gave them their first and last command. "We're disbanding." The room erupted into chaos, but I didn't explain. I simply handed them the liquidation documents my lawyer had prepared. "The underworld has no future," I said. "Go legitimate or get out." By dawn it was done. Exhausted, I dragged myself to the master bedroom, only to find Ethan sitting on my bed, holding a photo frame. Marcus and that belly dancer, the so-called white moonlight, smiled from within the glass. "This is my room," I reminded him. He looked up. His pitch-black eyes met mine, steady, unflinching, too calm for a child. "I know," he said softly. "They told me I'm under your care now." "It's guardianship," I corrected, loosening my tie. "Think of it as a long-term investment." He lowered his gaze, fingers brushing the edge of the frame. "Are you planning some kind of grooming game?" he asked suddenly. The words hit me like a slap. "What?" "Like how Dad groomed Uncle Ryan." Ethan continued, voice low. "Paid for his ballet lessons, sent him to Vienna, then locked him in the basement." My throat went dry. "How do you know that?" I saw it. The dim light caught his face, those eyes darker than sin itself. "I followed him one night. Uncle Ryan had a chain around his neck. Like a dog." "Marcus, you sick bastard. I won't do that to you," I said before I could stop myself. My voice sounded foreign. "I promise." Ethan studied me quietly, as if trying to decide whether to believe me. Then, in the smallest voice, he asked, "Will you give me money?" "Yes," I said carefully. "A lot of money. More than your father ever gave you." He tilted his head, thoughtful, testing my limits. After a moment, he handed me the photo frame. "Here." "What's this?" "Dad's most precious thing." His smile was faint, almost innocent. "For your new daddy." The glass was still warm from his touch. In the picture, Marcus had his arm around that dancer, both of them looking impossibly young and radiant. "Thanks," I said dryly, setting it aside. "But you don't need to call me Daddy." "Just Alex is fine," I said. "After all, I'm only 20. Ethan nodded and hopped off the bed. He made it to the door before turning back. "Alex." "Yeah. Will you run away too?" The question hit harder than I expected. It was so direct, so casual, like he already knew the answer. After Marcus's death, everyone left. I disbanded the gang myself, handed out severance pay, and told a 10-year-old child that his father's empire no longer existed. To him, I must have looked like just another adult walking away. "No," I lied, my voice steadier than I felt. "I promised your father." Ethan smiled, that quiet, knowing smile Marcus used to wear when he signed contracts. The kind of smile that said, "I know you're lying, but I'll let you think you aren't for now. Good night, Alex." The door closed softly behind him. I let out a long breath and collapsed onto the bed. My back was damp with cold sweat. Dealing with that little devil was more exhausting than negotiating with the old foxes in Marcus's business meetings. My gaze fell to the photo frame still in my hand, Marcus and Ryan, one stern, the other gentle. I flipped it over, hoping to find a manufacturer's mark or a price tag. Instead, I noticed a line of tiny words scratched into the back with a knife. My perfect creation. A chill ran through me. Who carved that? Marcus? Was Ryan his creation? Ethan's words about the basement and the chains came flooding back, twisting my stomach. White moonlight, my ass. That inscription wasn't love, it was ownership. Did Ethan know about this carving? Did he give me the frame on purpose? For the first time, I realized my so-called long-term investment might come with serious risk. I set the frame down gently, vowing to install fingerprint locks on every door by morning. Raising a gloomy kid was hard enough. Raising one whose father was a perverted mafia boss, and who might have seen too much, was a full-time nightmare. Since Ethan moved into the main house, I've begun to suspect our fates are fundamentally incompatible. My stocks crash the moment I buy them. Promising business deals collapse just before signing. Even my internet connection mysteriously dies when I'm closing contracts online. And then, the final straw. I just brewed a perfect cup of imported coffee and sat down to review a merger agreement worth hundreds of millions. Ethan tripped, caught himself, and sent the entire cup flying. The papers were soaked. I stared at the dripping mess, my pulse pounding. Let's go, I said flatly. Ethan blinked, face splattered with coffee. Where? The monastery, I gritted out. We're going to pray. Maybe it'll get rid of this cursed luck. At the temple, incense smoke curled thick and sweet around us. I bowed deeply, clasping my hands together like a devout pilgrim begging for mercy. Behind me, Ethan stood with his hands in his pockets, wearing the unimpressed expression of someone silently judging the world's collective superstition. On a whim, I decided to draw a fortune stick for our relationship. Naturally, I got the worst possible one. That night, the house began to feel haunted. Whimpering sounds drifted through the corridor, soft, broken sobs that made my skin crawl. Clutching the prayer beads I'd brought from the temple, I tiptoed toward the noise. It led me to Ethan's door, which was slightly ajar. I peeked inside. The boy who had spent the day mocking superstition was curled up on his bed, shoulders shaking. He was crying so quietly it barely sounded human. The sight made every trace of fear vanish in an instant. Right. He was only 10. He had lost his father, his home, and now he was stuck with me, a guardian who cared more about market trends than emotional stability. To make it worse, I dragged him to a temple and talked about sending him away. Pretty miserable, even for him. I hesitated before pushing the door open. Hey, I said softly. The crying stopped. Ethan jerked upright, eyes red and glassy, face pale as paper. He looked at me as if he'd been caught stealing something fragile. Alex, his voice trembled. Are you really not going to want me anymore? The question hung in the air like a blade, suspended by thread. Are you really not going to want me anymore? I stood frozen in the doorway, watching this child, who'd spent all day wearing the mask of someone twice his age, finally crack. His red-rimmed eyes gleamed in the darkness, vulnerable and terrified in a way that made my chest ache. That's not what I meant, I said carefully, stepping into the room. The temple thing was just superstition. Bad luck. I was being stupid. You said we're cursed. His voice was so small. That our fates are incompatible. Christ. Had I actually said that out loud? I sat on the edge of his bed, maintaining a respectful distance. I was frustrated about work. It had nothing to do with you. Everyone leaves, Ethan whispered, staring at his hands. Mom left when I was 5. Dad brought home Ryan and forgot I existed. Then Dad died, and Ryan, he trailed off, swallowing hard. Ryan disappeared the same night. My blood ran cold. What do you mean, disappeared? The basement was empty. The chain was still there, but Ryan was gone. Ethan looked up at me, and for the first time, I saw genuine fear in those dark eyes. Do you think he ran away? Or do you think Dad did something to him before he died? The question settled over me like a shroud. Marcus had been shot during a deal gone wrong, or so the official story went. But what if there was more to it? What if Ryan had been involved? I don't know, I admitted. But Ethan, whatever happened to Ryan, whatever your father did, I'm not him. I won't abandon you, and I sure as hell won't lock you in a basement. He studied me with those unsettling eyes, looking for the lie. I let him search. There was nothing to hide, at least not yet. Promise? He asked finally. I promise. Something shifted in his expression then, softening into something almost like relief. He nodded once, then lay back down, pulling the blanket up to his chin. Alex, he murmured as I stood to leave. Yeah, the coffee today. I didn't trip. I did it on purpose. I turned back slowly. Why? Because you were going to sell Dad's casino chain to the Huang Corporation, he said matter-of-factly. They have ties to human trafficking. I read about it in Dad's files. My mouth went dry. The merger I'd been reviewing, the one worth hundreds of millions, had been with Huang Corporation. If what Ethan said was true, how do you know this? I know where Dad kept his real records. The ones he didn't show his accountants. Ethan's eyes gleamed in the darkness. I can show you tomorrow if you want. I stood there, processing the fact that this 10-year-old had just saved me from making a catastrophic business decision and had destroyed my expensive paperwork to do it. Get some sleep, I said finally. We'll talk in the morning. As I left his room, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just made a deal with something far more dangerous than Marcus's ghost. The next morning, Ethan led me to Marcus's study, a room I'd avoided since the funeral. It still smelled like expensive cigars and old leather, a monument to a dead man's taste. Ethan walked straight to the mahogany bookshelf and pulled out a worn copy of The Art of War. Behind it was a hidden panel that clicked open to reveal a wall safe. How do you know the combination? I asked. I watched Dad open it hundreds of times. His small fingers worked the dial with practiced ease. He never noticed I was paying attention. The safe swung open, revealing stacks of ledgers, USB drives, and photographs. Ethan pulled out a red folder and handed it to me. Huang Corporation, page 17. I flipped through until I found it, detailed records of shipping manifests, offshore accounts, and coded language that could only mean one thing. Women and children, transported like cargo. Jesus Christ, I breathed. Dad didn't care, Ethan said quietly. He told me once that morality was just another word for weakness. That's why I liked you better. I looked up sharply. Liked me? You disbanded the gang. You could have kept everything, the power, the money, the fear. But you chose to bury it instead. He tilted his head, curious. Why? Because I'm a transmigrator who knows exactly how these stories end, I thought. Because I've read enough novels to know that staying in the underworld only leads to betrayal, prison, or death. But I couldn't tell him that. Because your father asked me to take care of you, I said instead. And I can't do that if I'm dodging bullets or looking over my shoulder for the rest of my life. Ethan smiled, that strange, knowing smile that was becoming familiar. That's a good answer. He pulled out another folder, this one marked with Ryan's name. Don't, I said instinctively. You should know, Ethan insisted, pressing it into my hands. About what Dad was really like. About what he did to the person he claimed to love most. Against my better judgment, I opened it. The first page was a contract, written in Marcus's handwriting. A contract of ownership, signed by Ryan in shaky letters. The pages that followed documented everything: Ryan's training regimen, his diet, his schedule, even his emotional responses. Clinical notes about breaking resistance, building dependence, creating the perfect companion. My stomach turned. This is... I couldn't finish the sentence. Evidence, Ethan said calmly. Of what Dad really was. Of what he might have done to me, if he'd lived longer. I looked at the boy standing before me. Too calm, too knowing, too aware of the darkness that had surrounded him. Did he ever hurt you? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted the answer. No, Ethan said. He mostly ignored me. I wasn't pretty enough, I think. Not like Ryan. His expression was unreadable. But sometimes he'd look at me like he was planning something. Like I was a project he'd get to eventually. The implications made my skin crawl. How long had this child been living in fear, watching his father's obsession with Ryan and wondering when the focus would shift to him? We're burning these, I decided. All of it. The contracts, the records, the photographs, everything. Why? Ethan looked genuinely confused. They're valuable. Blackmail material. Because you're 10 years old, and you shouldn't have to carry this weight. I closed the folder firmly. Your father's sins die with him. You get to start fresh. For a long moment, Ethan just stared at me. Then, something in his expression cracked, just a hairline fracture in that perfect mask. Even the records about the Morettas? He asked quietly. They're the ones who killed Dad. This could destroy them. I hesitated. The Morettas were a rival family, vicious and territorial. If Marcus's records contained evidence against them, it could be leverage. Protection. but it could also paint a target on Ethan's back. Even those, I said. Let the dead bury the dead. Ethan nodded slowly, then did something that caught me completely off guard. He hugged me. Just wrapped his thin arms around my waist and held on tight, like he was afraid I'd disappear if he let go. Thank you, Alex, he whispered. I patted his back awkwardly and used to physical affection. Yeah, kid. Don't mention it. But as we stood there in Marcus's study, surrounded by the evidence of his cruelty, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just passed some kind of test. And I wasn't sure if I should be relieved or terrified. They say children grow up fast. With Ethan, fast was an understatement. At 13, he'd shot up like a weed, now reaching my shoulder. The baby fat had melted away, revealing sharp cheekbones and a jawline that promised future devastation. His eyes were still unsettlingly dark, but he'd learned to soften them with practiced smiles. He'd also become my most valuable business partner. The Nakamura deal is a trap, he announced one morning, setting down his orange juice. He was wearing his school uniform, pressed perfectly, tie knotted with precision that would make a military officer jealous. I looked up from my coffee. How so? Their subsidiary in Macau is being investigated for money laundering. When it collapses, it'll take the parent company down with it. Anyone associated with them will face scrutiny. He pulled out his tablet and showed me a news article from a Hong Kong financial blog. This was posted yesterday, buried on page 6. I scanned the article, my blood pressure rising. He was right. If I'd gone through with the Nakamura partnership, I'd be facing regulatory hell in 6 months. You're doing it again, I muttered. Doing what? Saving my ass. I set down my cup. How do you even find the stuff? Ethan shrugged, returning to his breakfast. I pay attention. You taught me that. Had I? I couldn't remember teaching him anything except basic table manners and how to balance a checkbook. Everything else, the business acumen, the strategic thinking, the almost frightening ability to read people, seemed to come naturally. Sometimes I wondered if he was the one who'd transmigrated, not me. Ethan, I said carefully. You know you don't have to do this, right? You could just be a normal kid. Play video games. Make friends. Go to parties. I have friends, he said mildly. Name one. He paused, fork halfway to his mouth. I have you. I'm your guardian. That doesn't count. Then I don't need anyone else. He resumed eating, conversation clearly over. This had become a pattern. Ethan was polite to his classmates, charming even, but he never brought anyone home. Never mentioned birthday parties or study groups. His entire world seemed to revolve around the house, the business, and me. It should have been concerning. It probably was concerning. But selfishly, I'd grown dependent on his insights. The business had flourished under our joint management. Marcus's blood-soaked empire had been thoroughly cleaned and legitimized. We own hotels, tech startups, real estate across 3 countries. The Ashar name now opened doors in boardrooms instead of back alleys. And through it all, Ethan had been there, quiet and steady, watching my back. You have that charity gala tonight, he reminded me, checking his phone. The one for arts education. I groaned. Can I skip it? You're the guest of honor. You donated $2 million. You donated $2 million, I corrected. I just signed the check. Same thing. He stood, gathering his dishes. I picked out your suit. It's on your bed. Try not to spill anything on it. That was 1 time, I protested. 3 times, he corrected, heading toward the kitchen. I'm starting to think you do it on purpose. I watched him go, this strange, too mature boy who'd somehow become the most important person in my life. The boy I'd promised to protect, but who spent most of his time protecting me instead. 3 years ago, I'd planned to raise him and leave. Save enough money. Wait until he was old enough to be independent, then vanish to start fresh somewhere else. But somewhere along the way, that plan had become unthinkable. Ethan had become home. The charity gala was being held at the Imperial Hotel, one of ours, technically, though I let the management company handle operations. Crystal chandeliers dripped light over silk-draped tables where the city's elite mingled with champagne and practiced smiles. I hated these events. Too much small talk, too many hands to shake, too many people who wanted something. Mr. Ashar. A woman in a red dress materialized beside me. Your donation is so generous. The children will benefit immensely. I smiled politely and nodded, already forgetting her face. This continued for an hour, a blur of gratitude and networking until I managed to escape to the balcony for air. The city sprawled below, lights twinkling like fallen stars. Not a fan of crowds? I turned to find a man leaning against the railing, late 20s, dark hair, wearing a suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent. There was something familiar about his face, though I couldn't place it. They're fine in small doses, I replied carefully. He smiled. I'm Daniel. Daniel Huang. The name triggered warning bells. Huang, as in Huang Corporation, the company Ethan had warned me about 3 years ago. The tech CEO, I said, maintaining my pleasant expression. I've heard impressive things about your blockchain initiatives. And I've heard impressive things about you. Daniel moved closer, his gaze assessing. You inherited Marcus Ishar's empire at 20 and turned it legitimate in under 3 years. That's either genius or extremely lucky. Probably both, I said lightly. I'd like to discuss a potential partnership. Nothing formal, just coffee. Maybe next week. His smile widened. I think we could help each other. Every instinct screamed danger. This was too coincidental. Daniel Huang approaching me at a charity event, suggesting a partnership, using charm instead of business formal communication. I'll have my secretary check my schedule, I said non-committally. Please do. He handed me a business card, heavy stock, in boss lettering. I look forward to it, Alex. The use of my first name felt too familiar, too presumptuous. I watched him disappear back into the ballroom before pulling out my phone to text Ethan. Huang just approached me. Wants a meeting. The response came seconds later. Don't go alone. I'll look into him. I pocketed the phone. Unease settling in my stomach. Something was wrong. The Huang family had been on my blacklist for 3 years, and now the heir was suddenly interested in partnership? There you are. I turned to find another familiar face. Min, an old classmate from before I'd transmigrated. We'd been friendly in the original timeline, though not particularly close. Min, I greeted. Didn't expect to see you here. My father dragged me along. Something about networking. He rolled his eyes. Saw you escape to the balcony and thought you might need rescuing. We talked for a while, casual conversation about business trends and shared acquaintances. It was refreshing, actually, to speak with someone who didn't want anything from me. You know, Min said eventually, there's a modern art exhibition opening next month. Very exclusive. I have an extra ticket if you're interested. It took me a moment to realize what was happening. Was he asking me? I started, unsure how to respond. My phone buzzed. Ethan, cars outside. Emergency. I'm sorry, something came up, I said apologetically. But text me the details? I'll see if I can make it. Min's face lit up. Really? Great. I'll send you the information. I hurried out, mind racing. An emergency? What kind of emergency? The car was indeed waiting, engine running. I climbed into the back to find Ethan sitting there, tablet in hand, his expression dark. What's wrong? I demanded. He turned the screen toward me. It showed a surveillance photo, grainy but clear enough. Daniel Huang entering a building. The same building where Ryan, Marcus's white moonlight, had been seen 3 months ago. Ryan's alive. I breathed. And working with the Huangs, Ethan confirmed, his voice flat. I've been tracking him for 2 years. He's been building a case, gathering evidence about Dad's activities. The Huangs are backing him. Why would they? Understanding crashed over me. They want to take us down. Yes. Ethan closed the tablet. Ryan thinks you're complicit in Dad's crimes. That you're just better at hiding it. He's been feeding information to the Huangs, helping them build a legal case to seize our assets. My hands clenched. We buried everything. Burned the records. Not all of them, Ethan said quietly. Dad had backups. Hidden accounts, safety deposit boxes in 4 countries. I've been tracking them down, but he met my eyes. Ryan had access to Dad's most private codes. He knows where the bodies are buried, literally. The car pulled away from a hotel, heading into the night. What do we do? I asked. Ethan was quiet for a long moment, his face illuminated by passing streetlights. When he finally spoke, his voice was cold, colder than I'd ever heard it. We need to find Ryan before he destroys everything we've built. The next 3 weeks were a blur of secret meetings and late-night research. Ethan had created a command center in the study, walls covered with photos, strings connecting names and locations like a detective's murder board. Ryan was spotted here. Ethan pointed to a warehouse district, meeting with a Huang Corporation lawyer. And here, another location, having dinner with a prosecutor known for taking down organized crime families. I studied the board, feeling trapped. We'd worked so hard to go legitimate. to bury Marcus's legacy. And now it was clawing its way back from the grave. What does Ryan want? I asked. Revenge? Justice? Freedom, Ethan said simply. He wants to be free of everything Dad represents. That includes us. We're not Marcus. In his eyes, we benefited from Dad's crimes. We inherited the blood money. Ethan's jaw tightened. He's not wrong. The admission hung heavy between us. So, what's your plan? I asked. Ethan pulled out a folder, new intelligence, freshly gathered. Ryan has a sister. She's been sick for years, some kind of rare autoimmune disorder. The Huangs are paying for her treatment in exchange for Ryan's cooperation. We can't threaten his sister, I said immediately. I know. Ethan looked at me with those dark eyes. That's not who we are. But we can offer to continue her treatment. Better treatment. No strings attached. Will he believe us? Probably not, Ethan admitted. But it might make him hesitate. Give us time to prove we're not Dad. I ran a hand through my hair, exhausted. This is complicated. Everything with Dad always was. Ethan moved closer, and I was struck again by how tall he'd grown. Soon he'd be looking down at me instead of up. But, Alex, you need to know something. The seriousness in his tone made me nervous. What? If Ryan keeps pushing, if he threatens what we've built? Ethan's expression was unreadable. I won't let him destroy you. No matter what I have to do. Ethan. I mean it. His voice was soft but absolute. You gave me a life when I had nothing. You kept your promise when everyone else broke theirs. I won't let anyone take that away. The intensity of his loyalty should have been comforting. Instead, it terrified me. Because in that moment, staring at this boy who'd grown too fast and learned too much, I saw shadows of Marcus in his eyes, the same obsessive devotion that had led his father to chain someone in a basement. We'll find another way, I said firmly. We'll talk to Ryan, explain everything, prove we're different. No one gets hurt. Understood? Ethan held my gaze for a long moment before nodding. Understood. But as he turned back to the board, I couldn't shake the feeling that he was humoring me. That night, I couldn't sleep. I wandered the house, eventually finding myself in front of Ethan's room. The door was cracked open, light spilling out. I peeked inside. Ethan was at his desk, working on something. As I watched, he pulled out a photograph, the one from Marcus's study, the one with Ryan. He stared at it for a long time, expression unreadable. Then, with deliberate precision, he took a lighter and set it aflame. I'm nothing like you, he whispered to the burning photo. I won't lock him away. I won't break him. The fire reflected in his dark eyes. I'll just make sure no one else can have him either. The photograph curled and blackened, Ryan's face disappearing into ash. I stepped back from the door quietly, heart pounding. At 13, Ethan shouldn't have been capable of that kind of possessive certainty. But he'd grown up in Marcus's house, learning from a master manipulator. And I'd been so focused on protecting him from the world, I'd failed to see what he was becoming. Or maybe I'd seen it and chosen to ignore it. Because despite the warning bells, despite the red flags, I couldn't bring myself to push him away. Ethan was all I had too. The years blurred together. Ethan's high school graduation, his acceptance to an elite business university, his seamless integration into our company's executive team. At 22, Ethan Ashar had become exactly what I'd hoped for: successful, respected, dangerous only to our business competitors. He was also devastatingly beautiful. The gloomy child had transformed into a man who turned heads wherever he went. Sharp features, mysterious dark eyes, a smile that promised secrets. He wore power suits like armor and commanded boardrooms with the same quiet authority he'd once used to manipulate my business decisions. We'd handled the Ryan situation 5 years ago, not through threats or violence, but through lawyers and evidence of Marcus's crimes that exonerated us. Ryan had gotten his justice and his sister's treatment. The Huangs had backed off, their blackmail, material worthless. Everything had worked out. So, why did I feel like I was standing on the edge of a cliff? Alex. I looked up from my desk to find Ethan in the doorway, holding 2 glasses of wine. It's past midnight, he observed, setting one glass beside me. Still working? Reviewing the Tanaka merger, I said, grateful for the distraction. The terms seemed too favorable. I'm trying to find a catch. Ethan settled into the chair across from me, the same chair where Marcus used to sit, though Ethan wore the space better. Less like a throne, more like home. There isn't one, he said. Tanaka's daughter is getting married next month. He's consolidating assets to give her a clean start. It's sentimental, not strategic. You're sure? I had dinner with her last week. He sipped his wine. She confirmed it. I raised an eyebrow. Dinner? Business dinner, he clarified, though something flickered in his expression. She's nice, smart, offered to introduce me to her single friends. For some reason, the thought made my stomach twist. That's good, I said carefully. You should meet people. Date. Should I? Ethan's tone was mild, but his eyes were sharp. You don't. I'm busy. So, am I? Somehow I make time. He leaned back, studying me. Youngmin asked about you again, by the way. Said you've been dodging his calls. Youngmin. We'd stayed friendly over the years, occasional dinners and art exhibitions. He'd made his interest clear multiple times, and I deflected each advance with excuses about work and responsibility. I'm not interested in Youngmin, I said. Then who are you interested in? The question felt like a trap. No one, I said. I'm focused on the business. You're 32, Alex. You've been focused on the business for 12 years. Ethan set down his glass with deliberate precision. Don't you want something for yourself? I have everything I need. Do you? He stood, moving around the desk until he was beside me. Too close. Close enough that I could smell his cologne, something expensive and subtle that he'd started wearing in university. Or are you waiting for something? My pulse quickened. Ethan. I've been patient, he continued, voice dropping lower. Finished school. Proved myself in the company. Built my own reputation. But I'm starting to think patience isn't the right strategy. What are you talking about? He smiled, that dangerous smile that reminded me so much of Marcus it made my blood run cold. Except where Marcus's smile had been cruel, Ethan's held something warmer. Something that terrified me more than cruelty ever could. You know exactly what I'm talking about, he said softly. You've known for years. I stood abruptly, putting distance between us. You're 22. I'm your guardian. Was your guardian. I've been legally independent since I turned 18. He followed me, predatory and patient. Try again. You're like a son to me. Liar. The word was gentle, almost affectionate. You've never looked at me like a son. You look at me like you're afraid of what you see. He was right. God help me, he was right. Somewhere between the gloomy 10-year-old and the man standing before me, my feelings had shifted into dangerous territory. I'd convinced myself it was protective instinct, familial affection, pride in his accomplishments. But late at night, when I was honest with myself, I knew better. This can't happen, I said firmly. Why not? Because I promised your father I'd take care of you. Because you grew up in my house, under my protection. Because it would be wrong. Ethan finished. Unethical? Inappropriate. He tilted his head. You disbanded a crime empire, buried evidence of atrocities, raised your dead husband's adopted son. We're past conventional morality, Alex. That's not. I've been in love with you since I was 16, he said simply. Maybe earlier. It's hard to pinpoint exactly when protection became devotion, and devotion became this. He gestured between us. But I'm tired of pretending. Tired of watching you deflect advances from people like Youngmin while you pretend you don't feel anything. My back hit the wall. Ethan stopped a foot away, giving me space but blocking escape. I'm not Marcus, he said quietly. I won't lock you away or break you down. I won't make you a possession. His dark eyes met mine, vulnerable in a way I'd rarely seen. But I can't keep watching you plan your escape. I'm not. You are. You've been planning it for 12 years. He pulled out his phone and showed me a screen. Flight bookings, property searches in Vienna, legal documents for transferring company shares. Did you think I wouldn't notice? The evidence of my secret escape plan glowed accusingly. How did you? I've had access to your account since I was 15, he admitted. I know everything, Alex. Every contingency plan, every backup identity, every safety deposit box in every country. His smile turned sad. You're very thorough. It's one of the things I love about you. I felt stripped bare, exposed. Why didn't you say anything? Because I kept hoping you'd stay on your own. He pocketed the phone. That you'd realize you belonged here. With me. His voice dropped to a whisper. But you're getting ready to run again, aren't you? That marriage prospect in Vienna. The opera director's daughter. You're actually considering it. It's just a meeting. Don't. The word cut through my excuse like a blade. Don't lie to me. Not about this. We stood in silence, the air thick with 12 years of unspoken feelings. What do you want from me? I asked finally. A chance, Ethan said simply. One chance to prove we could work. That this, he gestured between us, isn't just in my head. And if I say no? His expression shuddered, that familiar mask sliding back into place. Then I'll let you go. I'll sign whatever papers you need, transfer the company shares, watch you board that plane. He stepped back, giving me room to breathe. I'm not my father. I won't force you. But his eyes told a different story, a story of loss and longing and barely controlled desperation. I thought about the 10-year-old boy who'd asked if I would run away. The teenager who'd saved my business dozens of times. The young man who'd become my partner in everything but name. I thought about Vienna and freedom and starting over. And I realized with slowly dawning horror that I didn't want any of it. Not without him. One chance, I heard myself say. But we do this right. Slowly. Figure out what this is before we. I didn't get to finish because Ethan kissed me. It was gentle, devastatingly gentle, like he was afraid I'd shatter. His hand cupped my face with a reverence that made my chest ache. When he pulled back, his smile was radiant. Slowly, he agreed, breathless. We can do slowly. But the way he looked at me, like I was something precious he'd finally been allowed to hold, suggested slowly was going to be very relative. I'd spent 12 years trying to escape. I'd just stopped running. And God help me, I wasn't sure if that was the best decision I'd ever made or the worst.